Good day. My name is Shane Kennedy. About a year ago, I bought a website called newcenter.ca. The idea was to try and demonstrate a new way of doing sense making, perhaps of finding consensus. The idea being that polarization and extremes, by definition, really don't lead to the kind of unity that's required for large-scale coordination. I.e. us actually working together functionally as a society, or even as a group, or even as far as having conversations with your friends. You know, it seems to be a two-sided story for a lot of people. You know, interpersonally, you hear many stories where people are able to have very constructive conversations. That's often been my experience with most people I talk to. Then again, once you head on to Twitter or YouTube, it's anything but. So that was a little bit of an introduction to what I wanted New Center to be. So what I'm going to do here today is I'm going to try to outline what I think is one of the principal ideas that underpins this idea of New Center, or a conciliatory sense-making, or let's say dialogue or communication process. So I'm doing this partially as a response to a Rebel Wisdom video that I'm going to put in the link below. Great to be able to say that. And I feel this video is a great jumping off point. And inside this video, he talks about a blue church and a red church, and the blue church being a more established dogma, or let's say epistemology or way of looking at the world, one more aligned with conventional media and past ways of power structures operating and coordinating us. And then the red church being a reference to things like the intellectual dark web, meme magic, and some of these new, more viral, bottom-up ways of communicating, and this new kind of interplay where it seems like the mainstream media, traditional political structures are being undermined and replaced, or at least there's a contention, by new forces. So you have this idea, and I think a lot of us can kind of agree with it, that a lot of previous systems and standards are kind of going by the wayside. You know, if you want to go 100 years back, you could say religion being supplanted by, you know, a more mainstream materialism, a more mainstream secular way of looking at the world. You want to go 400 years back, you could talk about the beginning of the Enlightenment and the traditional cosmology of religion being replaced by the scientific way of looking at the world. If you want to go back a decade, you could talk about the levels of overlap between people of the left and the right, the liberal Democrat / conservative Republican split, and how there was a lot more alignment. The 90s would be a pretty good example of that, because a 90s Democrat or liberal, I'm Canadian, would be very at home in today's Republican Party, let's say that as at minimum. So you do see these kind of changes. So as we're all in this world, you know, okay, so I should just take one step back. So the way I'm going to approach this is, I as an individual, well, how do I engage with that, right? I'm not trying to lay out the correct idea. I'm not trying to say that my point of view is the best one. I'm not even trying necessarily to say what you should or should not believe. I'm going to talk more about a process. And that's kind of what I was getting at with this sense-making way, a process where we can find a new center, a place where even if we don't agree, we can at least have that minimum of understanding and ability to reach the minimal level of consensus to actually move forward, have a productive conversation, exchange information, you know, and avoid discord, civil war, and all those nasty things. So what I'm trying to lay out here is this idea, okay, so, you know, am I of the left? Am I of the right? There's the questions you might ask yourself. Is this true? Is this not? Should I believe in God? Should I not? You know, is science the only way to go with it? Does intuition have a role there? Is spirituality? There's many different things you could look at nowadays. And you could say, well, is it okay to be socialist? How about socialist policies? You know, is it always free market, or is that just a little bit too limited? Because sometimes free markets work great, but if the incentives don't align, like in American healthcare, you spend a lot of money and get worse outcomes, right? With all these different viewpoints, right? Whether you're center, left, right, you know, libertarian, any way of looking at the world has pros and cons. This is by definition going to be true. No one viewpoint can ever try to or can achieve being a perfectly coherent framework to look at the world. That's why science makes models. That's why ideologies are usually simplifications of, well, by definition, are simplifications of reality and can only explain so much. That's why some people like Jordan Peterson would argue that religions try to have a balanced narrative where you always have a yin and a yang for every situation. So order can be good if it provides a structure to build off of, and it can be bad if it's a tyranny that opposes you. Chaos or opportunity, the other side of the yang, yin yang, can be great if it's opportunity, if it's new information, if it's a fertile plain, and it can be disastrous if it's if it's, what would it be called, a flood of information, or a jungle with you where you have no nothing but the clothes on your back, or can be so much information that you don't know what to deal with it, right? So given all these different paradigms you could operate from, you might ask yourself, well, which is the right one? Which one should I hold? Who's correct, right? And then you can enter conversations about, well, that applies to my values, and you're going to get into things like Haidt's beliefs about the 5 different moral paradigms. You could try to care most about fairness. You could be utilitarian in that sense. You could care about sanctity and have the correct role of authority. You could care about the amount of harm. There's lots of different ways you could split this cake. But the way you solve complex problems, and this is how your mind works, is by having it's a neural network, right? It's a lot of different nodes. This is the premise that underlines democracy. The idea that you have many different votes and you get a wisdom of the crowds. I'm misusing that phrase, but the idea being it's that no one agent in the system embodies an understanding of the whole system. The way the system operates, any system really, is by different impulses lining up. You have some mechanism to sort through them, and you get a response, right? So for your mind, you're hungry. You're also have a front part of your brain that says, okay, I can wait an extra, you have frontal cortex, I can wait an extra hour to eat because I'm working right now. Another impulse might desire for you to go to sleep. You have all these different impulses in your brain, but you coordinate them, and hopefully the combination of all the different nodes or different thought patterns, or whatever level of resolution or framework you want to operate in, them working together is ultimately what generates the best solution. This is kind of how evolution works too, right? In the sense that in evolution, you have, whether it's a species or a group of species, each has a little variation. Some are completely different, but it's all these different manifestations, concrete manifestations of impulses or modes of being, or you could say thought patterns. Anyways, there's many of these different things operating in a space where there's some selection mechanism that's going to pick what's the best, okay? In democracy, it'd be a vote. In your brain, it's the physical thing you act out. In evolution, it's what survives, okay? So this is how complex systems are actually able to be navigated, okay? This is just descriptive truth. This is just how reality sorts out complex problems. Now, to some extent, it is possible from a rational perspective, if you can map out a situation really well, let's just say like the laws of physics, you can predict where the cannonball is going to go up and where it's going to land. So don't get me wrong, there are situations where the model or your way of looking at things is sufficient that you can approach something bordering on right-wrong dichotomy, right? Or you could even say you approach like such a high level of confidence that you can get close to right or wrong. And that's great, but what I would try to argue is that these are in the more simplistic kind of situations. So I'm going to summarize everything I'm saying. Maybe I should have done this at the beginning, but everything I'm saying is this, okay? When it comes to complex ideas, what I'm trying to put forward is that everyone should have the humility to realize that it's in the integration of many different viewpoints, many different nodes, many different impulses, whichever way you want to look at it. It's in those integrations, that's how we as humans make good decisions. So the principle for New Center that I'm laying out is the idea is that if you bring people together and you get really good at the process of that integration, the process of that data transfer, the process of allowing all the viewpoints to be reflected in whatever decision or understanding or action that comes out of that process, if you can get good at that process, that's probably the most important thing. And that's, because that's going to give you the unity. And furthermore, it takes a little bit of pressure off you as an individual to not feel that you have to model this perfect understanding. It gives you a little bit of breathing room to say, okay, well, maybe in an economic debate, I'm going to just model the concern about making sure that the concepts of a free market being the most efficient way to allocate resources, and property rights being the most effective way to ensure a proper motivational structure because people own things to take better care of them. So I'm going to represent that viewpoint. And then another person on the left can bring forth the viewpoint of, okay, well, we got to make sure that whatever system we set up, a certain amount of efficiency or effectiveness being sacrificed for a certain number of equity, or not having certain people stack up at zero or get nothing. Well, you might want to sacrifice some of that free market or put some constraints on property rights if it substantially raises the number of people who don't get completely screwed over or have a better chance to participate, right? So it gives you a space to both, believe your thing strongly and be right about what you're saying, but with the humility to acknowledge that if it actually comes time to operationalize these ideas in the real world, almost by definition, you're going to need to use diffused computation. Okay, these complex problems are going to have to be broken down into smaller subparts. One person being a libertarian, one person being a socialist, them coming together, it balancing out, it integrating, it jostling, it's searching the landscape of best possibility that's most pragmatically and evolutionarily desirable, and that's one of the key goals. And I think this way of looking at things allows you to be very tolerant. It allows you to be very inquisitive of what other people believe. It allows you to keep constructing your own mental castles with realizing that, okay, I can build up my understanding and become more and more right without being too overly confident about the blind spots that are necessarily going to exist in that. And the last idea I'll put out here is that I'm trying personally to try to understand all the viewpoints at the same time. I would really like to have some capacity to, simultaneously wear a conservative and a liberal hat at the same time. That's a very vainglorious ambition, but I'm only 33, so I figure I give myself 50 years to get halfway there, and let's call that a goal. So thank you for the 10 people who are going to listen to this. I hope this was okay, and I'll hopefully post something again soon, and hopefully I'll get better at structuring these in a way that makes sense. Any and all comments that anyone has, if you've made it this far, just have at it, tear me apart, just say whatever you want, especially when it comes to formatting. Anything I could have done to make this video more watchable, that's what I really like to hear. And then secondly, if anybody who does reply, I'd be more than happy to have a group chat or have a dialogue going. Why I'm doing this beyond just getting myself out there in the New Center platform is my goal is to start using these videos, this YouTube channel and the website as a vehicle to start making more connections and start practicing some of this diffused computation and sense making that I've been talking about. So I hope you do check out the Rebel Wisdom video below. Maybe I'll make a follow-up video where I more directly talk about it. But I think as we start thinking about how we're going to operate going forward as individuals in various sense-making apparatuses, I think keeping this principle of diffused computation as the best way to make decisions in complex systems, and that being descriptively true, i.e. objectively true, and subjectively, pragmatically the best way to go. This is something I believe very strongly, and if I haven't made that case very clearly, please point that out as well and why I have not, and I'll start refining that argument, which would be another example of diffused computation. Okay, thank you so much everyone, have a great day, and much love, God bless.